Distraction is proud to be sponsored by Omega Bright, the premier natural advanced omega-3 formula for mind, heart, and joint health. Oh, I mean, Josh, interrupt you, but 99 out of 100 people would say, cut the crap, stop it. I'm just chewing,
Absolutely. It comes off as someone trying to control someone else from outsiders. And
the princess and the pea. What do you mean? The way I'm chewing upsets you that much? Get over it. Hi, this is Dr. Ned Hallowell for Distraction. Today we have a very interesting show about a condition that I'll bet almost none of you have heard of. I won't say none of you, but I'll bet you, I'll be surprised if any of you have heard of it, put it that way. And we're really lucky because we have a true expert on this condition joining us all the way from California, a man by the name of Josh Furnas. And he's on a mission to raise awareness about a condition that he suffers from, as do many other people. And the name of the condition is Misophonia. Josh, please talk to us.
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Hallowell. Yes, I appreciate one of the world's experts. That's very gracious and probably definitely overly stated for my humble approach. I have been involved in raising awareness early on in the forefront of that, and some of the major press points that it received. But there's minimal, but starting to gather momentum on the research side and the audiologist side, where I guess I would say like the true experts unquestionably are. And even in that context, Dr. Hallowell, the experts, most of us are relatively unaware of what's really going on, even for those who are medical practitioners.
Well, first, just tell us what it is.
Yeah, misophonia is a neurological disorder where your brain responds to what most would consider everyday sounds. The reactions can be filled with stress. Anxiety levels can shoot through the roof at the moment what we call a trigger sound occurs. Feelings of anxiety, rage can spark and can flip a switch from someone who has experienced a trigger, who was just enjoying the conversation or enjoying their time with someone, to immediately the opposite end of the spectrum. They are no longer comfortable in the situation. They can no longer do anything but focus on these extremely perceived negative triggers and emotions. And
let me just clarify, if I could, Josh, jump in, because this is old hat to you, but it's brand new to our listeners. Yeah. So a noise that he's referring to as a trigger could be the noise another person makes when they eat, when they breathe, when they chew, when they yawn, when they whistle, even the way they move in their chair or the way they fidget. So it's known as selective sound sensitivity syndrome. And it's hard to believe, but that someone, by listening to the way someone chews, could fly into a rage, correct?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the reasons it's hard for most people to comprehend is, this is an everyday sound. That I hear that every day. That I have literally no reaction to that, and that someone can have something so polarizing, so consuming from clicking on a pen or from chewing gum is kind of hard to comprehend.
It sure is. When did it start in you?
For me, and for most pre-teen to early teen years. For me, I very much remember age 8 when I first saw someone in a summer camp chewing a banana, something that I'd seen many times before. And all of a sudden I started paying attention to it, started reacting to someone eating that banana differently. Didn't understand it, didn't understand what was going on, didn't understand my internal reaction to it. From there, it just started growing from that one trigger, from that one situation. And in misophonia, triggers usually start accumulating and getting worse.
And just take me back to that banana. So someone was eating a banana, and what did you feel?
Yeah, and you look back, over 20 years ago now, the fact that it sticks out so much in my head still makes a statement to the trauma that can happen when a trigger is created. But in that moment, you start having this physiological response, this hair-raising response. You can feel anxiety, and as an 8-year-old, you don't even really understand what anxiety is. And so now I can describe something that I couldn't even understand then. The anxiety spikes. And then there's this acute anger kicks in. Anger is probably an understatement, more like a rage.
And the rage is at the person or at the sound? What is the rage about?
That's actually a really confusing perception for most people, Dr. Hallowell. Where we place that blame, I think, actually depends on maybe where we are in our own struggle with misophonia. But at first, it's always at that person making that sound. It's very much that person is doing something to harm me, is the fight or flight response that we're experiencing.
Well, now it must be very particular. So if you're at a restaurant, you're not triggered by everyone's chewing, right?
Yes, that's correct. There's a lot of small factors in there, like the more ambient noise that exists in the surrounding, the harder it is for someone with misophonia's brain to pick up on and focus in and have a reaction to a particular trigger. But very much so, loved ones, people who you are close to, will trigger you, will create reactions, and usually most people who experience misophonia, their first triggers are with either their brothers or sisters or their parents, the closest people to them.
And gosh, and what do you do about it?
Well, today you can do a lot more than you could even 5 years ago. Before 5 years ago, if you were experiencing this, and even if you were thinking ahead and trying to Google or look it up, there was no name for it. It wouldn't show up in the Google search results. And with how rare it is, you're most likely you're struggling by yourself. Your family doesn't understand. Your family might be getting misdiagnoses. They could not even understand what you're going through, but they won't. Josh,
interrupt you, but 99 out of 100 people would say, cut the crap, stop it. I'm just chewing,
Absolutely, it comes off as someone trying to control someone else. From that first moment, from outsiders, and
the Princess and the Pea. What do you mean? The way I'm chewing upsets you that much? Get over it.
Exactly. I can't chew this way. I can't click my pen. These types of things. Absolutely.
Right. And yet, it is a bona fide neurological condition. These people like you. Your brain you can't control it.
Yeah, and because I was at the Misophonia conference this past weekend, we were looking at some of the where they share a lot of the research, and even other rare disorders that people might not even heard of. There's thousands of papers on tinnitus. There's hundreds on hyperacusis, and up to today, there's literally dozens. I think they said 34 that reference the word misophonia. So even in the medical community, 9 out of 10, that's probably an understatement, probably 19 out of 20 practitioners won't even have heard of it if you walk into a hospital or a doctor's office and mention it.
So just for our listeners, why don't you define those two conditions you named?
The other two, hyperacusis and tinnitus?
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I was misdiagnosed with hyperacusis for the first decade of my life because we didn't know misophonia existed. Where misophonia encounters rage and stress and anxiety for a sound, hyperacusis is the reaction of sound that feels harmful, like you feel like you're being hurt by it physically. And tinnitus, a little bit more common.
So wait a minute. Let's just stop on hyperacusis. So hyperacusis is an exaggerated response to sound where you feel like you're being hurt by it?
Yeah, and that's a non-practitioner's rough dialogue on it, at least how I was explained to it as I was misdiagnosed for years. Yeah. And then tinnitus being hearing the ringing of sounds that don't exist. Ringing
in your ear.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, there are tinnitus is a well-established. Most doctors have heard of that. I've heard of that, and there are metabolic causes like aspirin can cause tinnitus, and but it can drive people crazy because it can be very hard to treat.
Yeah, and that's why usually we were getting categorized. People with misophonia are getting categorized under these other things that seem like, they're having troubles with sound. So we don't know what we can't describe it, so let's pack it in here. It's just where it seems like it's closest to.
Well, now we're going to take a moment to talk about our sponsor.
Hi, this is Sarah Gerton, producer on Distraction, here to talk to you about our sponsor, Omega Bright. As Dr. Hallowell has mentioned in the past, Omega Bright is an extremely pure pharmaceutical-quality omega-3 supplement. I take it, and now lots of other people around here in the studio take it too. So one of the things that I really like about Omega Bright, besides how well it works, of course, is the strict independent testing that they do. Omega Bright, just so you guys know, it's independently tested at each stage of the production to ensure the purity, concentration, and high EPA ratio. And it's independent. That's like the key word there. It's independent, so you know you're getting what you pay for. That matters to me. So if you'd like to order Omega Bright for you or your kids, they do make a version for kids. My son loves the Tutti Frutti flavor. But if you'd like to order it, call 800-383-2030. That's 800-383-2030. Or you can go to distractionpodcast.com and click on the Omega Bright logo and get yourself some Omega Bright. All right, take it away, Ned.
All right, we're back with Josh Furnas, who was just about to talk about how misophonia is treated. Josh?
The standard treatment is there is no treatment.
Wow.
That's the standard treatment. There is no known cure, and some people have positive reactions to different things, from cognitive behavior therapy to mindfulness-based stress reduction type therapies. Some people have gone out on extremes and tried exposure therapy and hypnosis. Most people, especially when you're suffering from something so rare and so misunderstood, will try anything.
Medication has no effect?
Some people dive into medication. I did as well for a little bit. Some people take medications that mute emotions so you don't feel the severity of the emotions. And I myself did that for a while. I felt lost. I felt like I'd lost myself. So
you're left with avoidance, and then when it happens, just dealing with the reaction?
Yeah, I mean, even on the we spend a lot of our lives. Avoidance is strong. I feel like you have to balance willpower and avoidance, and avoiding these, and you create lifestyles that are heavily on the avoidance side, and for better or worse, yeah, that's the truth.
Have they ever done studies where they induce the reaction while you're hooked up to an EEG or an MRI?
Yeah, actually, the current landmark study for misophonia was just that. They had put a little over 30 people with misophonia and 30 control patients through an fMRI and through the actual triggers, and it's the first tangible evidence, although we all feel that we knew this who suffer, that there is a different brain response for those who have misophonia than those who don't.
Well, that's good to know. So there's certainly an organic basis to it. What an amazing condition, and it's really wonderful that you're, out front about it. I gather Kelly Ripa has it as well. Yeah, Kelly Ripa, she was open. She came out that on 2020, and actually, just a few weeks ago, Whoopi Goldberg came out and said, wow. I have misophonia. So there's two big names there. Maybe it's a marker of talent. It's probably a bit self-proclaimed, but there is a lot of dialogues of creativity levels and such being higher within people who suffer. Yeah. Yes, I wouldn't be surprised. Well, I can't thank you enough. This is a tremendous service for a condition that most people have not heard of, no pun intended. And it's really wonderful of you to come on. Thank you so much, Josh. Yeah, Dr. Hallowell, thank you for being open to raising awareness, to talking about something that is challenging to a lot of people. And if one person gets this message relayed, I think there's a huge success in the chance that they have in having a better life. Absolutely. Thanks so much. Take care. Thank you, Dr. Hallowell. Bye-bye. Bye. Okay. I'm very pleased to welcome to Distraction Dr. Phillip Gander, Assistant Research Scientist, Human Brain Research Lab at the University of Iowa. Would you first explain to our listeners just what misophonia is?
Right. Well, really simply, misophonia is a word in Greek that means hatred, miso, and sound, phonia. And that gives you kind of an idea about what it is. It's people having an extreme reaction to sound. And so it's a special category of something that researchers have talked about for a long time, which is just generally an intolerance to sound, which comes under the category of the term hyperacusis, which is sort of an oversensitivity to sound.
All sound?
Yeah, so that's the real trick. So that's why this one in particular, misophonia, is a very specific subset of sounds, usually in the category of interpersonal sounds. There are other things where people are overly sensitive to generally loud sounds or have particular fears of certain types of sounds. But misophonia seems to be different. And seems to elicit a very unique case of a reaction, a very negative reaction in people that hear these sounds.
What kind of reaction?
So we played these different categories of sounds to people who had misophonia and people who didn't. And what we found was that, sure enough, people had a different reaction to unpleasant sounds and rated them as unpleasant. But the misophonia group had a very unique and very strong negative reaction to these trigger sounds. But related to that is we found when we scanned these people in an MRI machine and looked at activity of their brain in response to these sounds, we found that a particular area of the brain that's sort of related to monitoring your internal body state, or something we call interoception as compared to perception. So perception is sort of our interaction with the outside world, and interoception is our interaction with the inside world. And so this is sort of an area of the brain that's responsible for monitoring your internal bodily states, and that's an area of the brain called the anterior insula. And this area of the brain was way overreactive specifically to the mesophonic trigger sounds. So not just the annoying sounds and not the normal or neutral sounds. And it was specific to this group of people who identified as having misophonia.
There must be different levels. Kelly Ripa said that her husband eating a peach bothers her, whereas the fellow we interviewed, so many more things bothered him and bothered him severely. So is that true? It's on a spectrum?
I think it's hard to say. I would have to say yes, I would think so. And that has to be related to how certain people seem to have very specific sounds and specific people that elicit these sounds as triggering them as having a reaction. But sometimes it seems to generalize, and so then it can be anyone, any person in the family or any person at all that makes this type of sound. And then that can become obviously very debilitating, right? So anytime you hear someone swallow or chew, so you can't now have lunch with other people at work or traveling in public transit or being out in public and where you're going to hear some of these sounds, or going out for dinner or things like this.
What can be done to treat it?
That's the real hard part. Right now, there are sort of sound therapies that are involved people trying to get used to or sort of desensitize their reaction to these sounds while they, at the same time, have some sort of sound masking. So basically they wear something like a hearing aid type of device, or it's actually a sound generator, and this sound creates a white noise in your ears. That basically is the intention is to cut out your reaction to these outside sounds that might catch you by surprise or you might not be prepared for. And then it's basically trying to lessen the impact of that sound. And through repeated exposure, then perhaps you'll become desensitized to that reaction.
What is there any idea what causes it?
No, that's also seemingly unclear. But one other clue might be that it often seems to be the case that this happens rather young in childhood. So many people can claim as early as they remember that these types of sounds were a trigger for them, or they can remember very specific periods in their youth, so a pre-teen kind of thing, where an association was made for a brother or a sister or something like this.
Let me just ask you a thought experiment. So let's say someone has misophonia, and let's say their sibling or their spouse's chewing triggers them. What if you just forced them to sit there listening to the person chew? They can't stay in a fight or flight state forever. What would happen if they were just forced to stay there?
I can imagine it wouldn't be very positive.
But wouldn't sooner or later it have to subside? Your neurotransmitters would peter out.
I think the person would, unfortunately, for lack of a better term, you'd have a bit of a breakdown first. And in terms of forcing people into these situations. Mm-hmm. But I think what we're hoping is that actually, with our new research, this targets a very specific neural network in the brain that could then be better targeted through treatment. Maybe ultimately with some sort of pharmaceutical, but perhaps also in terms of some sort of brain training type of neurofeedback type of thing. That exactly as you say, that I think that exposure would seem to be a key to a treatment at some point.
It's such an unusual condition, and it must be very crippling. I mean, how can you be on a date if you can't tolerate the sound of your partner's chewing?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, gosh, thank you so much. I really appreciate your coming on our podcast and appreciate your time.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Gander. What a fascinating condition that nobody's ever heard of. Now you've heard of it. And once you have a name for it, you'll probably find it in more places than you thought. To learn more about misophonia, go to misophonia.com. That's MISOPHONIA.com. Misophonia. We'll put that link in the show notes. Remember, if you have a question, and please do have questions, if you have a comment or if you have a show idea for this season number 2 that we're just starting, please reach out to us at connect@distractionpodcast.com. That's connect@distractionpodcast.com.